Okay, shall I commence?
Yes, you can start.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation, Considerations for Investing in a Steam Sterilizer. At the outset, we would like to appreciate the organizers for organizing this virtual exhibition and these webinars as well. We sincerely hope the exhibition has been of value to all visitors as well as these webinars. What I would be presenting here, it's a pretty different topic. What are the factors you should consider for investing in the next autoclave for your facility? As an organization increases its presence to various regulatory markets, as well as deepens its presence in the ever-increasing regulatory requirements of the home markets as well, the industry players will naturally be subject to much stricter audit requirements in the near future. And compliance to those stricter manufacturing practices will eventually become a must. Now, an autoclave is one of the most critical equipment for any laboratory. What questions must you ask yourself when you're thinking of your next autoclave purchase? We all know that when you look to buy a new autoclave, there are several options, components, models, and sizes that are available in the market. So our objective, it's pretty straightforward. We would want to give you a quick framework to help you discover the exact autoclave which is best suited to your needs. And some of the questions that we'll be asking in this presentation and your answers to them, they will enable you to make an informed decision. So first up, what are the types of loads that you would be sterilizing? The autoclave you purchase should possess the cycles which are capable of sterilizing your specific loads. So it could be glassware, media, discard, wrap loads, hollow loads, filters, and various other assemblies. Now, autoclaves can primarily be divided into two broad categories. You have vacuum autoclaves as well as gravity or also non-vacuum autoclaves. So non-vacuum autoclaves are suited for sterilization of non-porous goods and liquids, whereas vacuum autoclaves are ideal for wrapped, porous, and hollow loads. Vacuum autoclaves will efficiently remove air from the chamber and the load, thus allowing complete penetration of steam to your critical loads. But we've seen a lot of clients using non-vacuum autoclaves for some of the more critical loads, such as wrapped or hollow items. Now, that is not recommended because if you need greater sterilization assurance, you should actually be processing such critical items, wrapped or hollow loads, in a vacuum autoclave. But there is one other point that you need to consider as well, and that is the need of drying. So some autoclaves are equipped readily with the option of drying a load. And again, you have two options over here, normal drying and vacuum drying. Some non-vacuum autoclaves may have normal drying in which you would get typically around 80 to 85% drying efficiency. So this is for your loads such as glassware and non-porous loads. But if you're looking at garments or if you're looking at glassware as well, and if you would want 95 to 100% drying efficiency, then you would need to look at a vacuum autoclave option itself. Drying your items in the autoclave itself saves a lot of time and efforts for your operators, and it can boost lab productivity tremendously because depending on the volume of your loads, it would take much longer for you to sterilize and then transfer it elsewhere in order to do the drying of those loads. So in a vacuum autoclave, you can do it all at once. Getting to the next question, what would be an appropriate size of the autoclave? Now, determining the right autoclave capacity depends on two main factors. One is the size and quantity of the load, and second, what is the available space in your lab. But it's not only about the size and quantity of the load. You also need to consider how you would be placing the load in the autoclave. How would it be configured? How many loads would you have? How many glassware would you have? Also, one more point of caution over here. Though the size and quantity of the load may mathematically fit into the chamber, the way you want to place the loads in the chamber might be different. So you need to consider that aspect as well. You also need to check on the floor space that you can assign. You need to bear in mind that you will need to keep some space towards the sides of the autoclave for maintenance and service clearance purposes. And very importantly, whilst an autoclave may fit in the available floor space, people often miss out that it should be able to pass through your lab door as well. So that's something critical to evaluate when you're doing the evaluation of the autoclave. Water is the lifeblood of any autoclave, and I cannot emphasize this enough. It is an essential component that determines not only the effectiveness of your sterilization cycle, but also the lifespan of your autoclave. Many laboratories use a domestic water supply or tap water to feed their autoclave, but this practice can lead to costly downtime and expensive repairs if the quality is not appropriate. Besides that, poor water quality will also end up compromising the efficacy of your cycle. So please note that tap water contains a variety of dissolved minerals and salts, and that's entirely dependent on your location and what is the water source. Is the water coming from a ground well? Is it coming from a lake, river, so on and so forth? The more minerals the water contains, the harder it is. And hard water is problematic. When hard water is boiled into pressurized steam, it leaves behind mineral deposits on the unit's chamber, heaters, valves, and even on your load. In fact, hard water is similar to layers of paint. These deposits or these layers of paint will build up over time and will decrease the efficiency and functionality of the unit. So we recommend that you use only distilled water for your autoclaving needs. Now, have you properly checked the utilities that the autoclave requires? And have you checked the specification or the parameters of those utilities? If you're opting for an autoclave with automatic water filling facility, it would need a distilled water line as well. And that distilled water line should be capable of providing dynamic pressure as per the manufacturer's requirements. If you have your own site seam supply, you may also want to check with the manufacturer whether the selected autoclave can be connected to your steam supply. Also, when it comes to the drain source, it should be pretty close to the autoclave, typically not more than 4 to 5 feet away, but that's something that you would need to check with the manufacturer. And sometimes because of this, you might also need to undertake special plumbing jobs in order to install and operate the autoclave. Some autoclave models also need compressed air supply, so that too is something that you would need to look at. And finally, depending on the size and heater capacity of the autoclave, you also need to consider whether the autoclave requires a single phase or a 3-phase power supply. Is the wiring in your lab sufficient enough to handle the requirements of the autoclave? Now, this is a point that is often ignored, energy and water savings. But undoubtedly in today's world, it is vital that we give it the attention that it rightly deserves. Now, when most laboratories make a decision on an autoclave, energy savings in the long run is a point that is overlooked by most. Most autoclaves, in fact, have pretty high power consumption and may also consume tremendous amounts of water. Modern autoclave options do enable you to cut down these electrical costs to anywhere between 20 to 40%, but you still need to check with your manufacturer of the autoclave about the water requirement for every cycle and how much water is going to be consumed at the end of every cycle, because there are special accessories and steps that could be taken in order to reduce the water consumption. Going to the next question, have you checked whether you're receiving technical support for the autoclave? Now, one thing is for sure, majority of the people do not anticipate downtime. But when your autoclave isn't functioning properly, you want to be sure that the technical support that you get is competent and it is provided promptly. Downtime is costly, both financially and for your lab's productivity. It's best to inquire with your manufacturer about who would provide technical support in your region and when it's going to be available. When is the technical support going to be provided? Is it going to be provided within 48 hours of the complaint, 24 hours, 72 hours. Evaluate who will service the autoclave, should it need actual repairs, and availability of replacement parts as well. And most importantly, and I cannot stress this enough, you have to be sure that the service company or the local agent is factory trained. Now, coming to the next point about preventive maintenance services. Have you checked whether you get preventive maintenance services from your autoclave vendor? The best way to prevent downtime is by having periodically scheduled preventive maintenance visits. A manufacturer or the local agent of the manufacturer can actually devise a plan for service, which will be based on your usage frequency and perhaps even the kind of loads that you're sterilizing. Because if they're more critical and if you would want more periodic, more regular services or preventive maintenance works, that's something that you would need to check with the local agent. Most people, again, do not question the fact whether they're going to get the required training in order to operate the autoclave as well as maintain it. Apart from installation and startup training, you also need to check if the manufacturer is going to understand the cycle configurations that you're going to be using, whether there are any advanced cycles or loads that you may want to sterilize, and on the support for calibration and validation. Properly trained end users and lab technicians will undoubtedly help prevent downtime later, and it will also ensure that your autoclave is used in an optimal manner at all times. Knowing the answer to this question as to how your autoclave is manufactured is of utmost importance, because if you want to keep your lab environment safe, and if you want to know whether your investment is truly worth its value, the answer to this question forms the crux of it. At the outset, an autoclave is a pressure vessel that is expected to last over many years. So when you invest in an autoclave, it is an investment not only for a decade or longer, but much more. Typically, autoclaves are not recommended to be used beyond 10 years if they're not validated, but we do see customers that are using autoclaves for a much longer time without validation. So that's something that you would need to look at. Now, in order to ensure a longer lifespan of the autoclave and to be sure that your autoclave chamber is in good shape even after 10 to 12 years, you must ensure that your autoclave chambers are designed as per ASME guidelines, which is the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. At the same time, inquire with your manufacturer whether they have PED certification. So a PED certificate, which is not as popular or common as ASME, is important because it's a pressure equipment directive, which is notified by a European body that in effect validates the integrity of the autoclave manufacturing practices. And you can rest assured that a manufacturer with PED certificate is mandatorily required to conduct certain very stringent tests on the autoclave chamber to check whether they are absolutely safe for labs in case of any unfortunate happening. You would also want to ensure that the autoclave has CE certification. And finally, do inquire how is the integrity of the autoclave chamber tested. Hydro testing the autoclave is a gold standard in verifying the integrity of most pressure vessels. So that's something that you would want to check with the autoclave manufacturer. And finally, you would want to check on the door locking safety of the autoclave. What is the autoclave performance and accuracy that you're using? A good autoclave is able to constantly maintain the sterilization temperature in the band of about 1 degree Celsius once it reaches 121 degrees Celsius or 134 degrees Celsius. So for example, if your autoclave reaches 121 degrees Celsius, which is your sterilization set point, the autoclave temperature variation should not exceed much above, let's say 122 if it was 121 degrees Celsius set point, and 135 if it is 134 degrees Celsius set point. So it has to be in that band of approximately 1 degree Celsius. If the sterilization set point is 121, and if the autoclave temperature reaches 125 or 126 degrees Celsius, then it is overheating your load. and it might even cause damage to sensitive loads like media. So unless you're using the autoclave for discard or just straightforward sterilization of glassware, temperatures of 125 or 126 degrees Celsius will in fact be detrimental to your loads. You also need to ascertain whether your organization's present and future plans would require you to invest in an autoclave that gives a cycle print. Uh, would you need compliance to the 21 CFR part limit requirements, either today or in the future? Laboratories now are requiring some form of cycle record and historical records as well for internal traceability requirements and audit trails. Regulatory bodies might also ask you for your autoclave cycle records to verify the authenticity of the tests conducted, as well as validate whether your tests have been conducted as per the autoclaving practices that are recommended. Now, this is a question which is usually contentious. We have observed that several customers seek to purchase an autoclave on the basis of a particular budget. Now, autoclaves are critical equipment. They are required to carry out a critical process in every laboratory. Buying a lower class autoclave because the budget does not permit may not be in line with your future plans. Even though right now you may not have the need for an autoclave with a cycle printing option, you may need it 2 to 3 years down the line. So it would be better if you opt for an autoclave with cycle printing in the initial stage itself. Not many autoclaves are equipped with options for future upgradability. So if you think that you might be able to upgrade it in the future with cycle printing facility, on most occasions, customers realize that the cost of upgrading it is almost the equivalent to buying a new autoclave with the cycle printing facility. So that is why we would suggest that you buy an autoclave that is in fact future ready, that is future proof. As I said earlier, good autoclaves usually last over a decade or much longer. So if you're confident that you would have the requirement of cycle printing or even 21 CFR part limit compliance 3 to 4 years down the line, you might as well invest in it now if you're looking to buy a new autoclave. Therefore, instead of buying an autoclave under the constraints of a particular budget, it would be in your favor to first explore the best suited options and then design your budget accordingly. That brings me to the end of this presentation. So this was a brief overview, which was primarily intended to give you a handy structure of how to go about your next autoclave purchase. Undoubtedly, there are other points as well that you should consider for your autoclave purchase, but due to time constraints, I would not be able to cover every single point. I would be glad to address any questions that you might have on this presentation. Just to give you a short background of our organization, Equitron Medica Private Limited is an ISO 13485 certified organization. For over 50 years, we have specialized in the manufacturing of laboratory medical equipment such as autoclaves, ovens, incubators, water baths, refrigerated heating circulating baths, oil baths, and rotary evaporators. The emphasis and focus at Medica has always been on user-friendly products, and we pride ourselves with paying great attention to every single detail. That is one of the foremost principles based on which we feel our products can be an asset to any modern setup. In India, we have a majority market share amongst the major pharma F&B companies, and we're the preferred branded companies like Cipla, Dr. Reddy's, Lupin, Glaxo, Pfizer, Sanofi, Pepsi, Unilever, ITC, etc. We strongly believe in not just manufacturing and selling the products, but to understand and deliver a complete solution which is based on specific individual needs and your specific application. Application specific solutions have always been the philosophy that has driven us. I hope this session has been of value to you. If there are any questions you have, I would be glad to address them, or you could write to us separately on the contact details provided.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
Mr.
much.
Shah. Thank you. There is no question, just one comment.
Sure.
Excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you very much.